Oh my gosh, we're live. We're also going to check and see if we're getting audio from YouTube because this podcast lost an entire episode last week because of yours truly. We had a really good show, and the fun part was the update gremlins got me. They got me. They took all the audio and they made it disappear. So we're back. Modern Relics. I'm Angel. He's Lucky, and we have a special guest, as indicated by the banner, is Pastor Jason. I'm excited to have you here, man. Before we get to introductions, I wanted to point out to the both of you, as I get older, I'm starting to realize that when you become old, there's two ways you can go. There is the Werther's original butterscotch hard candies old, and then there's me, the York peppermint patties old. I found these. I had to get a bunch. I'll be enjoying these.
Did you order that with your Rudolph the Reindeer cereal I saw that you got this week?
As a matter of fact, it was on special. And while I can't give this out to the Halloween candy kids because they'll come egg my house if I give them old man candy, I thought maybe I'll sneak one for myself.
I'm a Werther's guy, by the way.
I figured. Somehow I knew that. We had a conversation about
and then
are those Thomas English muffins?
Yeah.
Bro. The Wayback Machine.
It really depends on which candy goes better with Black Label Scotch.
There you go.
Oh,
That's
there it is.
good point. Excellent point.
Yeah.
So today we're joined by Pastor Jason, and we just met. So Lucky, I know that you two have friends. You go back a little ways. So take us away with the introductions, man. I'm excited.
Excellent. Yeah. First of all, yeah, I found out that episode got lost when I went to go back and listen to it or watch it on YouTube, and it was just gone. And so I hit you up and I was like, "Hey, where'd it go?" And you're like, "Yeah, the Gremlins got it." So
it's horrible. We're firing our IT team right away.
Yep. Hope you can find some better paying jobs anyway. So
that's true.
But this is my dear friend Pastor Jason, actually Dr. Jason Murray, for those of you out there should be aware of that. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We go back, we go to the same church. He's our associate pastor there and family pastor. And him and I have developed a friendship over the course of probably the last, I don't know what, 2 or 3 years now.
3 years.
Yep. And he came to us via, I think your last stop through that area was Kentucky.
Correct.
And then you ended up taking on the job at the church that we had been going to for a little bit prior to you getting there, but not very much. Like you came in probably about 6 months to a year after we started going there. So and you were an amazing and very welcomed and blessing in addition to the family that we had built there, and we were absolutely grateful and blessed to have you there. And I just want to let you know that before we even get started. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as far as what the doctor stands for, and what your specialties are in relation to biblical teachings and such.
Absolutely. So the doctorate is in apologetics, which is a fancy way of saying that I essentially paid the equivalent price of a brand new boat so that I could have a paper on my wall that says I know how to argue about the Bible in strict philosophical terms. And I often regret that decision as I'm driving past Lake Coeur d'Alene in the summer. But the rest of the year, I'm glad to have kind of sharpened my chops in the realm of apologetics, because it also means that I apparently have some credibility when I speculate about odd matters and how they intersect the Bible.
Which is exactly why I wanted
tickled to hear you say that, because that's exactly what we're going to do today.
Yeah, we're going to stretch those limits a little bit. So.
Yeah, if you can think of a strange topic that you think has not been addressed by some biblical philosopher, and then roll the dice about whether I could find you a published book on it, we could either have a drinking game or slots. We could have some fun with that, because odds are I have at least read about it, if not written about it, and no topic is too odd. And in all seriousness, it's because we live in a culture now where the lies are thick and relentless and non-stop, and they come from all directions. It used to be the government, now it's everyone. And so who's telling the truth?
Yeah.
And if the Bible has a claim on the truth, is there anything the Bible doesn't address? And for me, the answer is no. If the Bible doesn't address it specifically, it speaks to the arena in which those ideas are being discussed.
I would agree. And this opening that you just gave us is exactly why I've been talking to Angel about bringing you on here. I was like, if there's one guy that we need to talk to about this kind of stuff, because we have questions that we can't necessarily answer because we have not spent the time due to other avenues of life in delving into these things. But now they're being kind of forced upon us within this culture. And
Absolutely.
we wanted to kind of explore the concepts that are in the gray areas of like what the average person who knows the average amount about the Bible, or even maybe even a little bit more than the average, still don't have real questions or answers to. And we're kind of like, don't know, is it a salvific issue? Probably not. So it doesn't really matter. But ultimately, if the Bible's addressing it, it all matters. And so,
Yes.
I kind of we've been talking about bringing you on here to kind of explore those concepts, and I'm glad we finally got you to come down and to be able to do that.
Yeah, me too, man. I'm really happy. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed. Thank you.
Of course. If you look back at the catalog, one of the first, I think the first episode that we did, we talked about aliens, and I think the topical reason for that was not just, the new reports that have come out near my neck of the woods in the Southwest about aliens visiting, and there's the shaky cell phone footage and the, pixelated stuff, which is pretty commonplace in pop culture. But there's also congressional hearings now on whistleblowers about, oh yeah, aliens are here. And what's funny is when you parse those things out, it's always, I know of a person with firsthand experience, or I know a guy that knows a guy that was there and saw the whole thing. So I'll start here. If life only exists on Earth as a blanket statement, math is probably not on your side. But that could mean unicellular organisms, bacteria, things around space dust. But taking that a step further to intelligent life, there's almost
the SETI problem, right?
There's no scientific rationale on life outside of Earth, save for the reduction to its potential origins. An exoplanet has to be in a habitable zone because of water. Liquid water is what we know of that sustains all life, at least on Earth. So we could kind of guess maybe where it's at. And then you look at the Bible from Genesis 1:1 to 3, will reduce down to let there be light, and then there was light. You go to Hebrews in the New International Version, and it says, by faith we understand the universe was formed at God's command, so what is seen is not made out of what was visible. Maybe that's open to interpretation. But then John 1:3 says, through him all things were made, without him nothing was made that has been made. Well, if all that's the case, how can this be if there are aliens right now, man, being studied in clandestine military institutions in the Southwest and Area 51? And I'm trying to find where there could be leaps of faith into this, and I just don't see them. And the Bible seems pretty explicit through the passages that I've seen, centered around all things through him that have been made. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that the people are without excuse. So, do aliens really exist? Does that really scale with your knowledge of research around the odd topic in biblical, precedent and theology? And for me, I've never been able to make that correlation. So it always seems like hogwash. But
we're starting off with a softball.
I mean, Lucky and I talked about this, where it was like, The consensus seems to be each time aliens are big in press, it's more of a misdirection from other shit. And I went down a rabbit hole on, well, anti-gravity, do we even have vehicles that could transport these things? What would it take to get to the nearest potential habitable star that we could see from here at 100,000 years? I mean, all of Jewish history is 5,000 years. How could we even extrapolate 100,000 years by top speed? It all just nothing makes sense outside of a creationist theory to me. What say you? I mean, I presume you saw some of the stuff in the press about the congressional hearings on aliens and so forth, and the whistleblowers, and everyone seems to be buying in, but I'm just not there yet. And Tom DeLonge, yeah, right,
chiming in on aliens.
Right,
he's a source of
his institution is actually who's like pushing the whistleblowers even harder and stuff. So
yeah,
I know that's not
but he
necessarily
joined the band
a softball
again, so maybe he's over it.
Maybe he's over it. Maybe
they
it's
just
all
put out a new album.
It was all for record sales, which seemed to be working. Again with the misdirection. I mean, what do you think about all of this, both from the possibility and from the devil's advocate standpoint? Because biblically, it doesn't seem to square.
When we say biblically, it doesn't seem to square. So I often think when someone makes a sweeping statement about what is true, there's truth in what is being affirmed, and there is usually a lie in what is being denied.
Mm-hmm.
Often an affirmation can be accepted as long as there's room. So in other words, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God created everything that exists. That is not a statement at all, not even a biblical statement of what we might or might not know. It's a blanket statement about everything.
It is because it is, not it is because we understand it. Is that basically what you're saying? Yeah.
Well, and I would say, ontologically speaking, what is being said there is there's nothing that exists in the known and unknown universe that was not made by God. Full stop. There's room for anything in that statement. And then the next verse begins a description of what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And so from just purely an epistemological standpoint, the study of what can be known, the Bible is not an account of everything.
No,
it just isn't. It doesn't intend to be. And what is often done in Christian circles is the Bible is used as a denial of possibilities. That's very often a problem at the outset. The Bible is not intended to exclude possibilities.
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I just say that at the outset because, and I don't know if I'm quoting Shakespeare or not, because I'm not a well-educated doctor. And the narrowness. One thing I found in higher education is the higher up you go, the narrow it gets until you're finally studying something so pointless.
Right.
But again, if you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars, you finally begin to realize I'm an idiot. And the question of aliens
mm-hmm.
is almost entirely not specifically answered by the Bible, unless you start from. So let me do this. If I start from the outside and ask myself, what's happening out there when people are talking about aliens? There is misdirection,
Mm-hmm.
clearly. I mean, clearly we are being lied to by all kinds of people who both deny the existence of aliens and who affirm and intensely pontificate about the existence of aliens. There's lying and misdirection and confusion all over the place. And I haven't even brought up our government yet.
Right.
So if you start...
Or governments in general.
That's right. So you have that. But then you have, and you alluded to this a minute ago, Angel, I have sources I consider credible whose anecdotal accounts I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And this includes a couple from Guatemala with whom I served on a church staff in Bell Gardens, California, who swear up and down in the name of the Lord Jesus that they saw aliens. And I'm fluent in Spanish, listening to Spanish with a Guatemalan accent, listening to them describe a scenario that I believe happened to them. Do I believe that they know what that was? Do I believe that their interpretation of that event is airtight? No, not even close.
I would say, and Angel, you know, basically my very flat out, just kind of lack of belief in aliens. That I honestly believe that, yeah, entities exist, but they're interdimensional entities that are very much described by God and by biblically throughout Old and New Testament of deceptive creatures that are demonic in nature, and that, man, they would sure love us to believe that they were big-eyed, grayed aliens wandering around and flying around in ships.
Yeah.
So, and that's my general belief. So,
If I were to play my cards, that's kind of where I land on most of what is touted.
yeah,
Well, so
and so
that brings up a theory I've long held, right? When it comes to specifically prophetic descriptions of stuff yet to come, right? And the example I frequently use, because this is the only way I can logically package this up in words, is we're probably in agreement that vampires aren't real. But somewhere down the line, whether it was a spiritual creature or a vision or something, somebody saw something that was drinking from somebody's neck that scared them shitless. And they ran and told in the best way with the knowledge they had to describe what they saw around the campfire. And thus the legend was born of some piece of truth by someone's account. And on. Now there's ethos behind it and all that stuff, right? So
my mom has theories about that, and my mom,
yeah,
and I wouldn't disagree with her on this, is that all myth, whether it be Celtic, Greek, Roman, Norse, all of them, all of the fauna creatures such as cyclopses and
sure,
and elves and fairies and all that, all have some basis in truth due to the fact that she relates them all to offspring of the Nephilim or Nephilim offspring of some kind. In fact, there's a great comic book series.
Thus tying us back into biblical sourcing.
Exactly.
For some frame of
and
reference
just for the
And-
listeners in the audience, we're not trying to explicitly exclude minotaurs. I think we're an equal
at all,
opportunity
no.
mythical creature discussion board today.
Centaurs and Minotaurs
Just
are
wanted to
welcome
put
on our
that up.
podcast at any time they come to town.
But you know what you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
somebody describes something and it's like, from my vantage point, not that I have some superior knowledge or foresight, I believe that you saw what you saw, but I don't believe how you described it to be fact in its entirety. Is that
Sure.
line of, am I way off on that? Or from
No, I mean, so I think you're correct. And so look, this touches on the question of the stakes in the question. How much does this matter?
Mm-hmm.
Someone says they saw aliens. Okay, you had a strange experience and it was over. Someone says that they were abducted by an alien and it has warped the entire fabric of their life, and they're still plagued by visitations to this day.
Yeah, the stakes change. Yeah.
The stakes change.
Right.
And so pastorally, what I found is then we have to begin to assess what's happening. And from a truth standpoint, and so my vantage point as a pastor is, I do believe the Bible to be, I have ended up in the camp of verbal plenary inspiration of the autographs of Scripture, which is not a Catholic, it's not a strictly Roman Catholic position.
Yep.
It's not an Eastern Orthodox position, both of which camps I find to be historically credible in their own right and culturally credible in many respects, even though I'm not in those camps. And the reason I mention that is there's a long pedigree in the broader scope of Christian history of reportage of these aliens. This has been reported by monks It's been reported by mystics within different camps of Christianity, including art. Art has borne witness to this, and they kind of look the same. They always end up kind of following a pattern, but they're not called aliens. I mean, I'm talking about right down to the same kind of tropes, the same pictures that are now described as LGMs. We've got essentially cave drawings of those guys from mystics from the early medieval period, but the church father said, "Oh, it's demons." So it's a strange thing to be not denying the reality of these experiences on some level, but disputing their interpretation of, while also admitting that in the larger realm of Christian credibility, if I can put it that way, this has been addressed before. And we have an odd thing in today's sort of postmodern environment and air and water that we drink and breathe today, where I feel like there's two ditches. One ditch is this hyper materialism by which we just kind of deny that any of this could be anything but a hallucination or a big head fake, because
complete dismissal, right?
It's complete dismissal on philosophical materialistic grounds, and then the overreaction to that, which taps into the older human stream of experience, which acknowledges that there's more things in heaven and on earth, Horatio, than are dreamed of in your philosophy. And we know that there's probably more than even what the Bible tells us. But I'm going to end up acknowledging that if I have a person in my camp who's being plagued by something like repeated experiences of alien visitations or objections, I'm going to start acknowledging that in Christian history, this is something that starts to look like demonic oppression and even possession sometimes. And if the cultural vibe today is to believe in aliens because the only thing greater than us than we really believe in is extraterrestrials, because that's the vibe of the day. That's the only way. That's the only way a modern materialist can think about something greater than humanity. Then that's the way we're going to go. And so even here in Christian doctrine in Calvary Chapel camps, where I am now today with you, we're going to. Our church is not officially a Calvary Chapel, but that's our culture. The rapture happens and all the Christians are taken out, and maybe some Catholics get snuck out with us because, you're believers and God admits you didn't for our kind of believer. I'm poking fun.
Hey man, ritual contrition.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're probably coming with us, bro. I just don't know that you're expecting to.
Oh, he isn't dragging him.
So we get raptured out of here, and everybody left behind says, "Oh, they were abducted by aliens."
But that's now we spoke about that. I said that's the cover story. If biblical ethos stops there for humanity, that's the pop culture answer to a biblical prophecy. Alien abduction.
I'm rambling and probably completely incoherent.
Oh, so. No. Because what's been pop culture since the 1950s and 60s are the little egg-shaped big eyes, they're going to come visit. Now it's more and more pop culturally accessible and there's a possibility. And so, if the rapture is nigh, so to speak, and, X number of folks are just gone. I mean, that's a perfect cover story. Let's put on our tinfoil hats for modern relics. Let's scrunch them down tight. But I 100% resonate. We've talked about exactly that before.
Exactly that.
Exactly.
Let me interject. I know we have to get maybe onto the next topics, but I want to interject that C.S. Lewis's space trilogy has to be acknowledged as a credible thought process in this. Paralandra, and then that hideous strength, where C.S. Lewis, a credible Christian apologist from the last century, envisioned from within a perfectly orthodox Anglican background, the entire possibility of aliens within an entirely Christian framework, that even from the pre-scientific mode he was operating from, before relativity was really known about, he was correct. There was nothing either scientifically impossible about what he envisioned, nor Although we would now acknowledge that obviously Venus and Mars, we know that that's not
Sorry.
happening.
I think I actually have those books back here somewhere. So, but yeah.
Yeah, my point with bringing him up is that it is entirely both biblically possible and scientifically possible, from my vantage point of being a biblical apologist who's not entirely ignorant of current developments in science, that God could have done this. There could and probably are created races and worlds that are just outside our ken.
Yeah.
And why would we need to know about them? Especially if we have some kind of at least locally unique ontology of being depraved and fallen and sinful. Would God kind of put us in a space, maybe dimensionally, where we're alone to quarantine us?
Yeah.
I mean, look, if we want to get speculative,
Like we're
and
God's social engineering exercise among all creation?
well, if God can do what he wants. What if we're not the only experiment he wanted to run?
Yeah.
And would he
Running
need to tell us
multiple
about it? Would he be
experiments at the same time.
morally obligated to tell us about it? His moral obligation might be hide it from us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is now really strange speculation, but this is where I would say there's just so much more that we don't know about it. And to say that because the Bible doesn't describe this, it doesn't exist, that's not the purpose of biblical revelation.
Well, I'm glad you brought that back up too, because I think my outlook on the Bible has changed a little bit from letter and law to guidepost in the ethos of meaning. And I got there through studying Maps of Meaning, which was written by Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I dug really, really deeply into that. And it also stretches.
I really like that guy.
It really stretches the absolute limit of my brain's computational expertise in some of these areas. However,
he's this close to getting saved. Dr. Peterson is. I mean, he's on the cusp. He already teaches on Christian.
yeah, I'm going through the Exodus series actually right now, which I find fascinating because he's bringing perspectives, secular perspectives and Christian perspectives and Jewish perspectives. But yeah, I've come to that kind of naturally, like, well, this isn't just because it's not in there, it can't be real kind of thing. Because the most fun argument, specifically from a Catholic perspective, is the missing pieces of the Bible. Well, if this is historically incomplete, then it's by definition irrelevant. And then the faith-based side of it, if God didn't want it to be there, it wouldn't be there. You know, so you've kind of got this really fun, unwinnable argument on that perspective. But I think you're right. I think
the Apocrypha is the repository of early Judaism.
Right.
I mean, that's how we know what the Jews of Jesus' time believed, and they believed a lot of stuff that's not in Christian theology today.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the dinosaurs alone fit into this equation of, well, the Bible says about this much about dinosaurs. So you've got whole swaths of Christendom that basically believe they don't exist at all, and then other swaths that are right in the middle that actually go, no, they existed and probably coexisted with man in a new creation, 7 to 8,000 year kind of creation period, and then other people who fall under the category of Christendom that says that that the Big Bang and evolution coexist within Christendom and God, and that there is a whole pantheon of eras stacked up on top of each other where dinosaurs lived way back here and not amongst man. So there's a whole bunch of variety within that also kind of fits within the same kind of framework and concept of aliens in the sect of Christendom across the board, of people who think that they're like me, who think that they're completely just demonic entities living in a outside of our dimension realm that love to deceive people, and then people who go, no, why wouldn't God create outside of our perceptions other groups of species that he can experiment with on his own accord, however he feels fit, and there's different elements that I think even the dinosaurs explain, or are explained within that realm. Um, Real quick to touch on the Nephilim portion that I was touching on earlier. Just for fun, there is actually a really great comic book series called The Dark Ark that I read, and it was great. It was completely fantasy, but it was about Noah's Ark and what was going on there. Well, at the same time, a demon comes down and actually talks to this like sorcerer and goes, "Hey, God's got Noah on this ark thing, and he's taken 2 of every animal, and then just these 8 people, and he's going to save humanity through that ark." But here's the thing: he's not taking all the centaurs and the manticores and the vampires and all of those. He's not taking any of those. Uh, and
The Dark
if
Ark.
you,
So that's where they
yeah,
went. They were.
yeah,
They
they're on
weren't
the
first
ark.
class on the Titanic. Is that
Yeah,
what you're
there's
saying?
2 of them going through. Yeah, they were second class. They were on the lower decks.
Sure.
But they were cruising along at the same time, and the battle is because all of the creatures, or basically all of the creatures on the Dark Ark, all live off of flesh and blood, and all of the flesh and blood is on the other one, and they're starving. And so, but the guy, the sorcerer who is in charge of that ark, he's actually like, no, we got to make sure that they live because they need to replenish our food supply. And if you kill them now, we all die, all of us. And they are like starting to battle each other and kill each other for blood on the Dark Ark. And it was a really great series, kind of cool concept. But obviously, from a very stretched perspective of the kind of Noah, the history of Noah. But it was fun to read, and I just thought if anybody's out there and wants to read a cool comic book series, the Dark Ark series was actually really well written.
I think that's cool. In fact, I'm one of those people. I will definitely check that out.
Yeah.
I wonder though, cool Lucky, you mentioned the different sects of, you have the pro dinosaur, the anti dinosaur, and it's all based on the acceptance of the theology, whether it's pernicious in nature or it's truth or it's some amalgamation of both, leading people astray. Why can't we all get along with the knowledge that we have? Is it A, in your estimation, the fact that it's our own ego that won't allow us to be anything other than the top of the food chain in any dimension? Or is it B, something that we must know because humankind is at the limit of its technological prowess? It's at the limit of its ability to expand within the, post evolution aside, within the environment that we exist in today.
If I understand the question, I kind of think it's both. That's often the answer. On the one hand, if I'm understanding you right, there's an ego factor here that comes into play pretty quick. Even spiritually, it is hard for us to so a Christian becomes a Bible believer, and part of my motivation for believing the Bible is it circumscribes everything for me and it makes it all safe. And then my ego gets invested in that safety, and it becomes my little safe space where nothing can ever be greater than me and God. God and I make a majority, and there's no aliens, and the only strange things that could exist are devils with red horns and a tail, and
exactly
angels that
right,
look like cherubs. I mean, it all fits what, not just the Bible, but not even the Bible, what I think the Bible is. It ends up being an expression of me. That's the ego part.
And you just articulated why I stopped going to church.
It makes sense because what has happened is the Bible is strawmanned for
you.
And you believe the straw man, and then someone debunked it rightly, and then where were you? Then on the other hand, the actual upper limit of what we know is almost non-existent. And so I find that as a pastor, I'm kind of a Stephen King fan. I'm a comic book fan. I like Stephen King's most when he writes about the paranormal. Because I'm sorry, this is a weird zone to take this podcast. So
we're here for it, man.
Edit this out in a minute. But my brother, who's an atheist, got me into Stephen King because Stephen King, oddly, cannot stop writing in a quasi-Christian universe.
Oh yeah.
The Stand
The Stand
is almost a Christian morality play in the post-apocalypse.
It's my mom's favorite Stephen King
Yeah.
book because of exactly that reason.
And
Yeah.
yet the Dark Tower series, which you love it or hate it, the Dark Tower series is the most depressing closed universe, like specifically literally closed cycle of a repeated nobody wins, the good guy is the bad guy is the good guy, and it's and yet Stephen King
It's almost a microcosm of God putting humankind in its own quarantine zone, dimensionally speaking.
It really is, and that seems to be what Stephen King is wrestling with.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, quarantine zone. That seems to be what he's wrestling with, and Lucky just used the term experiment, I think maybe twice. We've kind of admitted or acknowledged probably what the Western beef with God is. What is he doing? Is he playing a game with us? Is he running a circus? Is he trying to get certain results?
The proverbial ant farm.
Yes,
the absence of known purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. Clifford D. Seamack's book, The City, is an amazing like end times, secular end times universe. Greg Bear's Eon and Eternity series. You get out to the end of time, the universe, and everything, and what they've done is they've bootlegged in an alien higher power. It's really just a shorthand for God without any of the Christian shorthand. And so, just to bring all this back, I feel like the Christian imagination is always too small.
Yeah.
Because we're afraid to even read the Bible and admit that what the Bible has done is pin down everything that we need to know. And so salvation is by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. That's a description of the way the gospel as we preach it and teach it. But the core truth there is it can be described in an agnostic fashion. If some unbeliever in the forest of Papua New Guinea ends up just accidentally turning to the cosmic Christ, I mean, the actual, literal, objectively real Son of God in the universe, without knowing almost jack squat about who he has turned to, he's saved.
Yeah.
Whether he knows it was by grace alone, through faith alone, or not. And that is also a universe where a million crazy things are happening that we know nothing about. And all of them point to the reality of the true God, about which we know next to nothing.
Yeah.
Compared to the wide universe of what might be known.
And I think that's, at least loosely, the pathway I'm scribbling toward is, and I mentioned this to your buddy too back in June when I was up there, but one of the most fun warnings that just lives in my head over and over again is, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them, but woe to the inhabitants of earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you having great wrath, for he knows his time is short. It's Revelations 12:12, and that's kind of a call to action and a bit of a warning. So with all this disarray and theological buffoonery in the face of what I perceive as a lot of ego, and being able to hide behind the red horns and the cherubs, me and God, and the rest is just what it is. Makes me ask questions like this, you know?
Yeah, the ego is always in what you deny.
Right.
Oh no, that can't exist. That's where the ego and the smallness is for me.
Yeah. You touched on the lack of imagination in Christendom. And I think that you're correct, and that actually is displayed very, very prominently in the current church culture, artistically, in art and in music, and in the beauty that God created for us to explore. And I mean, we had a stranglehold on the art culture and music culture all the way through the Renaissance era, all the way through into essentially the Norman Rockwell era of the United States, and we gave up on it because we became afraid of the imagination that God gave us. And I think that that's where we really dropped the ball culturally, is when we gave up on that imagination, and we've suffered for it on a large scale that bleeds into every aspect of our lives, including politically, where the arts and culture that steers the politics of the country, we have no stake in anymore. And I think that
No stake and no voice.
Yeah.
And no traction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Due to the fact of that lack of imagination that you just spoke of.
I mean, we're the people. Just think about Christian movies.
Yeah.
Everybody just knows that Christian movies are garbage.
Yeah.
And they're not wrong.
And the music as well. Like for a while there, we had like Aaron or Angel. Did you ever listen to anything on like Tooth and Nail Records?
Oh yeah,
the old,
yeah.
like-
I mean, like I grew up in. We went from anywhere from Creedence Clearwater Revival to the Gaithers to Michael W. Smith to pre-Amy Grant's weirdness to the Newsboys, and I mean, like I said, it was '90s. You know what I'm saying? It was a weird time. Audio Adrenaline was in there. I almost said Audio Slave, which is keeping Chris Cornell off food stamps for another few years. God rest him.
If you've heard of Idle Cure, then I'm really happy.
I've not heard of Idle Cure.
I'm not. No.
That's a cut that's a little deep.
Well, here's speaking of a deep cut, if anyone, like, I've been going back to the 80s when my mom would listen to stuff, and besides the old 70s Keith Green albums that she would play at 11 all the time, there was actually this awesome like 80s new wave guy that spread himself over every part of the 80s like new wave pop genre, and his name was Steve Taylor. And he was
guy's fantastic.
He's fantastic.
Yeah,
Better than Stryper?
Yes, actually, Stryper was great, and they actually just played in Spokane.
Did they really?
Which was really. Yeah.
Oh my God! Do they still have the hair and the
not the,
spandex pants?
They've lost a lot of the hair, but they're still wearing the black and yellow.
I love it.
Steve Taylor combined political commentary with really unique vocal style and pretty interesting musical talent.
Yeah.
And he also ended up being like, he was the guy that probably got decent talk squared away.
Well, he wrote all their music.
And he wrote all their music. Steve Taylor, Meltdown at Madame Tussauds.
Oh,
the album I Predict 1990.
Yeah.
I Blew Up the Clinic Real Good. That's one of his headline songs on I Predict 1990.
Angel, I highly recommend you go back and listen to some Steve Taylor. Like it was. I actually just played a song called
Do a
Lifeboat.
deep dive.
Lifeboat. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, remember Lifeboat? I played that because we watched the movie. One of my horror movie nights I watched with Oliver. We actually watched the kind of social experiment done sci-fi called The Circle, where they all wake up on an alien ship and they all like have to decide who dies next. And I watched it with Oliver, and he was kind of scratching his head at the end. And it's obviously with adult eyes. I mean, this was made in 2015, but a lot has happened since then. So, but looking back, it's obviously very Marxism and heavily social justice warrior kind of stuff going on in it. So it's a very woke movie, but ultimately the same theory applies in that regard, that Steve Taylor wrote a song about called Lifeboat, in a very short, brief song where he's pretending to be a teacher. But so I played the song for Oliver, and it just got me on the Steve Taylor track again. I was like, oh man, this is so great. But yeah, what I was speaking to more though was when they decided in the late 90s, when I was like in my latter high school era, that they decided, we're tired of the DC talks and the Michael W. Smith stuff.
Right.
Let's why can't Christian music be like loud and cool? And so Tooth and Nail Records was made, and that's where like MXPX came out of, and Blenderhead, and like a bunch of these like metal bands that like even I think Norma Jean came out of, and all of and like Zao, which is like this crazy loud metal band, and dozens and dozens of bands came out of these.
I have a special production level relationship with the record "Oh God, the Aftermath" from Norma Jean.
Yeah, and I think Under Oath was actually part of that as well too, and Demon Hunter and a bunch of other ones. But like they started really getting some momentum that kind of, I don't know where it went. I think all the bands ended up going, actually, this was just the only label we could get on. We're actually not Christian. We're going to go do this
It's
over
exactly
here.
what happened. Yep.
And so, but we have lost sight of being at the helm of that ship.
Mhm.
And there's a great book that my wife lets everybody borrow, every teacher, everybody who wants it. And I can't remember what it's called, but it's something about like, and she's going to be mad when she watches this that I don't remember the name of the book, but it's literally a book about exactly that, about like us losing
Mhm.
the arts and music culture, and that the reason why we're losing all of these other battles, not only within the churches but also within the secular political spheres, because we have let go of the culture out of fear of getting too close to the sun on it, of
Sure.
being too close to sin, too much in the world. And which
Francis Schaeffer called this out in the 70s, kind of apologist,
Mhm.
saying a torrent of words. The arts, the arts. If from his vantage point, evangelical Bible believers, we have surrendered.
yeah,
When we let go of the arts, we surrendered. And he called that out. I can't remember when Whatever Happened to the Human Race came out. I think it was 70s.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
He was how many years? 50 years ahead. He was describing where we live today.
yeah,
The Christians have abdicated. And I
yeah,
mean Christians of all stripes. I mean, if you think back to patristic or medieval art, both on the Orthodox side and the Roman Catholic side, Christians used to rule the planet
Right.
yeah.
in the arts.
The arts, yeah, without a doubt. And I actually have tattoo artist friends of mine who, like my buddy Doom Kitten, he actually said one time after a convention, he goes, and he grew up in the church with his mom, and he goes, we, he goes, I stopped caring about church because they stopped caring about art. And he goes,
That's so
every
sad.
single thing about the satanic world, even, but just not Christian world, but specifically, they've got cooler art. They have cooler art and they have cooler music, and it is due to the fact that Lucifer was the head musician, so it makes sense. However, um, but that's I call them hot topic Satanists because they like the cool art on the black T-shirts, and but he they don't really know anything about the actual practice of satanic worship, but man, it looks cool. And
That's what I like about my
but
friends' political commentary when I call them cosmopolitics because it's something they heard on
yeah,
John Oliver, read in the news, on the newspaper stand on the
right,
way out the checkout aisle of the grocery. Yeah.
yeah. But he said something pretty profound. He goes, "Yeah, like everything that Christian art is nowadays looks like your brother-in-law did it on Microsoft Paint," and he's
Right.
not wrong. Like it's and they just refuse to adopt or adapt anything that if it's beauty, God, it can be done in the glory of God, and he created it for us to create. I mean, we have imaginations for a reason, and to kind of shut that door in your brain and in your heart seems antithetical to why he placed it in us to begin with, and it doesn't make any sense why. But it shows, the fruit shows now of for generations of us shutting that door, and now we're in the position we're in, not only in the United States but on
Well, I'i'd like to
a
read that
global
book
level.
if you find the name of it because,
Oh, I will. Yeah,
there's got to be a moral compass, I would
I think it's like called
imagine.
the art killers or something like that. Something to that effect. I'll have
Yeah.
to look it up. But
There's
yeah,
probably a
I
moral
wonder what.
compass in there that would have to start and stop somewhere between closing the door and do as thou wilt, which,
speaking of this is a good transition into the next topic
yeah.
because we've kind of transitioned accidentally into art. But what are the next thing that I wanted to talk to was specifically about what the Bible says about AI, and we got to be brief. Um,
Yeah,
so
and so specifically, the question I assume is about the transhumanism, that part of AI. Are we talking about the whole
Yeah, I'll try
The
to.
identity-
the whole spectrum of artificial intelligence, but going into humankind's supposed evolution into that, and
I would say
dovetails.
I think
Go ahead,
it's
Andrew.
I think it's the more extreme of the two. Yeah, because if I were to set the table, I would say there is pretty good evidence that when we had the technological capability to leverage horses for everything we did, transportation, plowing the fields, whatever, was sort of upended by the newest technology in automobiles. And then the engine sort of became the prevailing architecture. Did it wipe out unbelievable amounts of jobs? And, no, we adapted to that. I think AI is a form of a tertiary tool to leverage computational skill and power is maybe a little bit different than Cyberdyne and Terminators. Right. And suddenly we get into what you're talking about, which is where I think we should probably go, is the blending of, organic and inorganic, AI taking over. The Matrix is here now. Suddenly, Terminators are everywhere, that kind of thing. So
sentient consciousness within a structure, a non-God made structure.
Correct. Because the parallels between AI and the ability to drive towards sentience, the whole we thought forever we could, we never stopped to ask if we should type of situation, where a lot of the big tech companies would love to just continue driving toward. There's a bit of a line there. So yeah, I think that's how I would set the table is the tool and the modernization and our ability to adapt. And then there's Cyberdyne, right?
Yeah, agreed. I have become cynical about the sort of terror porn side of AI. Like, I'm not as worried as I think a lot of my church people are. I don't think we're headed for even Brave New World, just to go back to kind of literature where some of this was sort of predicted, or Big Brother, where everybody's looking at screens, right? And now we're there. And yet it's not exactly that. We have, from my vantage point, we are using those tools as much as they're using us, and we can choose.
Yeah.
I mean, a free person, a free agent, even if I can be a pastor for a second, free agent in Christ. To the pure, all things are pure, it says in one of the letters to Timothy, meaning I can use a tool and be untainted if I am untainted. I feel like there's an ethic here that lets a Christian rise above all this. I'm not going to be scared of a post-apocalyptic vision of AI without evidence.
Right.
Now, what I am scared of is what I will call artificial stupidity. I mean, there are a lot of the manifestations of the interface with technology, the interface of culture with technology that I'm worried about is the dumb stuff. It's like that making us stupider.
Oh yes.
I'm more worried about that, but I don't think that there's any inevitability to that. I just want humans to be smart, and at the same time, now if we want to talk about Bible prophecy, it seems like there's a human urge and a spiritual, from the vantage point of demons that that probably have an agenda of their own. Sorry, I'm headlining this and talking way too quickly and about too many things, but it appears that there's a convergence toward apocalyptic realities that look like Cyberdyne.
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about that for lots of reasons. And I don't think that I need to join the hysteria. I'm just going to be smart.
Yeah.
And being smart includes using the tools.
Yeah.
Like my kids are video game freaks, and they're Christian kids. My kids are YouTubers, and they're Christian kids. My kids might take an implant. I'm a little bit worried about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
not because I'm afraid of the technology.
Yeah, I think to your point,
people.
I have.
I don't even know if I had a point.
Well, I have some degree of topical knowledge in this, as it ties into my profession a little bit. And I think what really frightens me more is that that stretching and thinning and dilution of ethics on a long enough timeline with technology like this. And the reason for that
Agreed.
is because at the end of every release, for example, when you go from pre-production to production, Chat GPT 3 to 3.5 to 4, when you can spin this thing out of control with questions, and you used to be able to do that in like under 8 minutes just by the nature of how you interface with it before it starts blabbering the most ridiculous outputs where you're like, oh, it's eating itself. The hash checks are all performed by human beings. Those hash checks are all introducing the idea of, is this input true or false? Is this reality or is this nonsense? All coming to Silicon Valley with the same type of ideology, coming from the same group of people that are quintessentially fact-checking the greater engine behind what's powering a lot of modern technology and the ideations of 3.5 and 4 and so on and so on. So is this true mixed with the fact that what we know about artificial intelligence in its current form is that it's great at historical stuff. It can process and deduce. It's very Sherlock Holmesian in that way. It is terrible at predictive stuff. Horrible. So when you ask it to go into the create space, it has to be hashed against people that all kind of work for the same 2 or 3 places, that all kind of have the same type of ideologies, that all kind of work under the same umbrella. That's where your stupidity. This is the seed that plants into those flowers. This is that ethical stretch where it gets more and more diluted from historical fact to hash check version of what is or is not socially acceptable, true.
That's almost exactly what I've tried to put into words with artificial stupidity. I don't have the vocabulary.
That's it. And you're dead on, because that's exactly how this thing goes. Cool. Now I have a new baseline. Now I have another new baseline. Now I have another new baseline, and all of that. I'm not
worried about the Matrix at all. I'm not worried about.
Yeah, it's our influence into what is true, and that becoming more readily usable as the next Google, right? Working with AI to power your search results and forming more and more algorithmic parameters on what profiles you as an item more than a human being that's seeking information. It's gone way far away from transactional, and it is becoming way more and more personal. But what makes up the ethics of the entity that is creating that personal connection is coming from the same 2 or 3 sources with the same types of ideology, with the same types of influence, societally speaking, which may or may not be slanted one way or the other. So you want to talk about how hard it is to see the great line between that overt and window that we've seen shift, that great line between the polarization of how we interface with one another politically, what is or is not socially acceptable. And I would argue that, 26 months of being locked in your house, so to speak, mostly around America, probably didn't help things as you just ingested more and more of your own algorithmic bubble. Oh, you like this? I'll feed you something like it. Oh, you spent time on this? I'll feed you more content like this. Understand that what's powering tomorrow's engines behind that are the same exact folks that are arguing for what is and isn't factual in what is supposed to be a free speech social network. Insert the name of the social network here. That's the dilution of the ethics that I think will power tomorrow's version of the truth.
Well, the sure sign of it, or at least one sure sign of it, is that nobody's asking, at least none of those people are asking, what is the ethics? There is an assumption that they are ethical, and they're also not asking, cui bono?
Right.
Who profits? I mean, you're alluding to the lockdowns. There were clear beneficiaries to that.
Oh, you think?
And yeah, and I mean, do I dare assume that it's clear? Clear to me. I feel like
there's pushback, but the voices are too small.
Yeah, that's right. And they're too small because the medium is part of the ethical debate. Who has a voice in an AI, pardon me for putting it like this, but an AI riddled environment? Like this is why some guys I know will only spend cash. Who controls the media of everything, not just information, but the mediums of exchange, the medium of relationships, the environments in which relationships are transacted. My kids are computer freaks because we realized when my oldest, who's now 20, was 6th grade, He came to me crying because he said, Dad, I'm the only one of my friends who doesn't have an electronic device. And I had to process, my son will grow up in a world where electronics are the utility for his human experience.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yep.
I can't get away from that. I can't fight that. I'm not going to fight that. I'm going to fight in that environment for humanity, for liberty, for, as you term, ethics. I'm going to be an ethicist. I'm going to, even if we have a debate about what that is,
Well,
we're going to be
look at
in
it,
that realm
Look
together.
at it from a risk-averse perspective, right? Let's imagine that there is an AI engine that's aggregating profile data on you that is now ingratiated into your rewards program at the supermarket. It also knows what your dating profile looks like and what you're interested in and who you've conversed with.
ESG, I'm a hater because I pastor at a fundamentalist church in North Idaho.
It also knows which banks you do business with. It can talk to other applications that help do your budgeting for you. Your profile information just gets more and more robust the more these things coalesce. So from a risk averse perspective, that might be one way to approach the kids, because I'm older than your kids by at least a generation hop, and I'm also very involved in social media, and I put out YouTube content about motorcycle stuff, and I stream on Twitch and all these things. But I have to be extremely careful with how there's a profile about me that's publicly facing, and then there's what I do and talk about here. And there's real differences in not locking those two horns up, because on a long enough timeline, all of that just becomes your digital signature. It becomes your chip, right? Yep.
Yeah.
I actually,
I almost.
yeah, no.
Oh, do you got to get going?
He does.
Okay.
He's got other things he's got to get to, but
well, dude, thank you for your time. Holy shit. I could go like this for another 4 hours, man.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe next time we talk on.
I would do this again, by the way.
I would love it, man.
Yeah, I would love to have you back, because there was areas that we didn't get to tackle, which some of those things were, I wanted to go over some regular Bible versus Geneva Bible stuff. I wanted to go over like the concept of Jesus in Britannica through his lost years with him, and maybe some less technology based kind of of stuff, and kind of maybe group it to a different episode there.
No, I love it. We'll start with the pop culture stuff, and we'll move into some of the more ideologically based and origin stories around that, because that's a deep interest of mine.
Stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So, but thank you, Jason, for taking the time and coming down here. It's been fantastic having you. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you. Yeah, we should do lunch outside of this room. I
know if I knew we only had an hour, I would have pushed the gas pedal a little bit, but thank you, man. This was big.
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on.
I want to apologize for being late, and next time I'll be better prepared, but this is fantastic. I love this. I hope it was not boring. I had a fantastic time doing this, and that's how we know it's fun for the viewer.
Yeah, no, I had a blast. This was exactly what I wanted it to be. So cool. All righty.
Well, cool. I will let it go there. Then everybody that's listening on Spotify, you're welcome to check us out on YouTube. This will be up there. Pastor Jason, is there anything you need to plug, or is there someplace we could find you for, I don't know, anything from counsel to conversation or anything like that? And if not, we can sign off there, but let us know, man.
If it's okay on this channel, I pastor at a church called Candlelight Christian Fellowship, and I am here for anyone who has questions related to anything you've heard. I'm willing to weigh in further, and also we help people.
Sick. And we can get him any questions you have too, as well as scheduling hopefully a follow-up here in the near future. And you could send that to modernrelicspodcast@gmail.com. So I think that's going to be it for us. We'll let you get out of here, man. Thanks a million.
Thanks, guys.